Good evening, and thank you for joining me tonight. Before we get started, I have some vocabulary words for us. We have the word mews. It's a British word meaning a row or street of houses or apartments that used to be stables for animals. Das Haus, a British word for cheap or inexpensive lodging, a place to stay for people who are homeless. Tarpaulin, number 3, a heavy-duty waterproof cloth. We usually call them tarps these days. Number 4, labyrinth, a maze or difficult passage or path in which it's difficult or challenging to find one's way. 5, elated means happy. 6, sextant, an instrument to measure the distance between objects used for navigation. 7, cutlass, a sword with a slightly curved blade, formerly used by sailors. 8, regalia, clothing worn for special occasions, usually by royalty. And 9, gauntlet, to go through an intimidating or dangerous crowd, place, or experience in order to reach a goal. So let's get started on our next chapter. The House of 100 Chimneys. The House of 100 Chimneys. Nan stumbled between 2 wagons on her way past Euston Station. Her body was weak and trembling. Blood was running from her shin, and she thought she might have turned her ankle when she dropped down from the rain spout. Growlers and omnibuses crossed in every direction. The whole city was a confusing swirl of hooves and wheels and shouts. The September fog meant she could scarcely see 20 paces in front of her. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she needed to get off the street before Crud found her. She hoped desperately that Newt wouldn't tell what he'd seen. A hulking train rumbled out of the station, shaking the ground. Nan glanced behind her shoulder before slipping into a mews that cut into Bloomsbury. She remembered Charlie in her pocket. He was probably terrified. She lifted him out. "That was a narrow escape," she said. "I hope I didn't scrape you when I squeezed through the window." Charlie stared at the narrow alleyway. Empty stables ran along one side, on the other, doors to servants' apartments. "Home?" Nan shook her head. "Not here, but we do need a safe place to hide." She thought she might be able to find lodging at a doss house in the old Nickel, or maybe get work in a factory along the river. But Crud would surely search in all those places. Besides, she wasn't sure she could make it that far in her current state. The longer she was in the streets, the more certain she would be spotted. "We need to go somewhere close by," she said, scanning the rooftops, "somewhere no sweep or climber will ever think to look." And that was how she found herself standing before the House of 100 Chimneys. The door was barred, and all of the windows were shuttered and locked. Nan thought her best way in would be one of the chimneys. The stacks were tall and decrepit. Most climbers wouldn't have risked scaling them without rope for fear of breaking their necks, but Charlie needed a home, and so Nan climbed. The inside of the stack was choked with spider webs and rats' nests and goodness knows what else. But these were old chimneys, built for the burning of wood, not coal, which meant that the walls were at least free of hard soot. Nan could feel Charlie shivering, and so she sang to him the way the sweep had sung to her. She slowly made her way down until she reached a hearth. "Here we are," she said, and drew Charlie from her pocket. She thought they were in a servant's bedroom, though it was hard to tell for sure. The windows were boarded up, and there were gray tarpaulins covering the furniture. Nan set Charlie on the floor. She felt her way across the room until she found a wooden chair. She turned it upside down and broke off one of the legs. She tore a strip from a tarpaulin and tied it around one end. "We have a torch. We just need a match." Charlie made an excited sound and then scrunched up his face in intense concentration. After a moment, a thin trail of smoke began to waft up from his body. A tiny flame appeared just above his right eye. Perfect. Nan lit her torch, which filled the room with flickering orange light. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust. It seemed like snow, she whispered. It's like snow, she whispered. She didn't know why she whispered. Charlie sneezed and rolled backward. Snow? He said, righting himself. Nan wasn't sure she could explain snow. I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise, she said. You'll just have to see it for yourself. They walked down the narrow stairs, guided by their torch. Each step issued an angry creak. That's just the house saying hello, Nan said. Charlie tried to say hello back. The house was enormous. Each room led to another room and another and another. Nan made a practice of watching her own footprints in the dust to make sure she wouldn't become too lost. By her count, there were 14 bedrooms, 3 parlors, a drawing room, a smallish ballroom, one giant study filled with books and another filled with maps, not to mention a labyrinth of hallways and staircases and closet passages. Nan told Charlie, they say this old house belonged to a famous captain and explorer who died at sea. It's been haunted ever since. Charlie made a questioning sound, and so Nan explained ghosts to him. But no matter how she tried, she couldn't make him understand the concept of death. Finally, she gave up. He would learn about death in time. Everyone did. At last came time for sleep. Nan told Charlie he could sleep in any room he wanted. He picked Nan's pocket. After all that ghost talk, she supposed she couldn't blame him. Nan chose the grandest bedroom for herself. She thought it must have been where the captain slept. It had a fireplace large enough for her to stand in. The closet was bigger than Wilkie Crudd's entire coal bin. A chandelier fashioned from an old ship's wheel hung from above, but none of that compared to the bed. The bed had 4 tall wooden posts that nearly touched the ceiling. In all her life, Nan had never touched a bed, not with a sweep, not with Crudd. Her only bed had been rooftops and stoops and open fields and coal bins. She approached the captain's bed and pressed a hand on the embroidered duvet, leaving a dark print. The duvet was stiff and covered in dust. She coughed and pulled it onto the floor. The sheets beneath glowed white in the darkness. Nan wasn't sure how to get into the bed, which was nearly as high as her chin. She decided that that was what the posts on the corners were for. She climbed the post and then set an uncertain foot on the mattress. She fell over at once. Nan had fallen many times in her life. To her, falling meant hurting herself. But when she fell on the bed, she did not get hurt. Instead, she felt herself engulfed by softness. Was this what sleep felt like for rich people? It's like lying on a cloud, she said. Charlie did not ask her about clouds. He had rolled out of her pocket and jumped up and down on the mattress. He had rolled out of her pocket and was jumping up and down on the mattress. It looked like fun, so Nan tried jumping too. They jumped for probably an hour. Finally exhausted and elated, Nan flopped back down. We should sleep now, she said. She drew a cover over her body and put her head on a pillow. Charlie rolled beside her and tucked himself in close. Within moments, she was asleep. A room for everything. Nan spent the first few weeks in constant fear of discovery by Crudd or the police. But she soon discovered that the rest of London had little interest in the house of 100 chimneys. Still, she was careful to keep the shutters closed and never approached from the street, entering instead from a turret window on the top floor. As days wore on, the house of 100 chimneys became a true home for Nan and Charlie. Their first task had been to dust and scrub every inch. Nan discovered she didn't mind the work so long as Charlie was there to keep her company. Together they inventoried all the interesting artifacts that the captain had brought home from his travels: spears and shrunken heads and treasure maps, and arrowheads and sextants, and clay pipes and pressed flowers and insect husks, and even a real cannon. Nan tried to shoot Charlie from the cannon, but it didn't work. It is a quiet marvel to watch another person grow up before your eyes. With each passing hour, Charlie seemed to be changing more into himself. After an unfortunate incident in which Nan's pillowcase caught fire in the middle of the night, Charlie had been made to sleep in a pile of loose soot in the fireplace. Every morning, the pile of soot would be a bit smaller, and Charlie would be a bit bigger. Charlie seemed to acquire language with remarkable ease. Individual words soon gave way to little broken sentences of 2 or 3 words strung together. Nan was exceedingly grateful for this. She had always disliked babies for their inability to plainly say what they needed. "Babies just cry and make you guess what's the matter," she said. "But you can just come out and tell me." Nan figured the more words Charlie heard, the faster he would learn. So she made a habit of narrating everything that she did. "I am trying on the suit of armor," she might say. Or, "I have a bit of watercress stuck between my teeth, and so I'm using this rusty cutlass to pick it out." Or, "I'm making a pincushion in the shape of Toby Squall." Nan remembered how the Sweep had done the same thing for her when she was small. Even when there was little to say, he would say that, and then some. The Sweep's words were the music of her childhood. It was probably the reason that, even though she could barely remember his face, she could still remember his voice. The dreams helped with that too. Ever since Charlie had been born, her dreams of the Sweep had become more vivid and varied. And they didn't feel like dreams anymore. They felt almost like memories, chapters of her life she had long since forgotten, rising to the surface. Nan felt fairly certain that the dreams were somehow connected to Charlie. But any time she asked him about it, he seemed unable or unwilling to respond. Even with shelter, food remained a concern. And so once Nan felt strong enough, she decided to take Charlie climbing. She bought a new brush and scraper by pawning a vase from the captain's den. Charlie was too big for her pocket, so she made a sling for him that hung from her shoulder. "You're nearly a month old," she told him. "It's time you saw something of the world." Nan had at first been nervous to step back into a chimney. She was still recovering from the horrors of the nudge. But Charlie changed things somehow. She knew that if she acted afraid, then Charlie would notice and become afraid himself. "It's easy as apples for folks like us," she told him the first time she forced herself up into a flue. "We got soot in our veins," and in saying this, it began to feel true. She kept to the West End, miles from where Crud or any of the boys might spot her. She and Charlie swept houses up and down Paddington, Westminster, and Kensington, singing for jobs as she had always done. The homes were large and beautiful, the streets lined with orange-leaved oaks. She kept Charlie in her sling while she climbed, and the two of them would talk the whole day through. With the cold days of November fast approaching, there was no shortage of work. Whenever customers asked the name of Nan's master, she would tell them she worked for the captain. This was a little joke between her and Charlie. Having no master meant she was regularly stiffed. But Nan didn't mind, because she was able to sell the soot she collected to a dustman named Horace Nobbs, who paid a fair price and asked few questions. "How a little slip of a girl manages to bring in 2 bushels a day is beyond me," he would often say. By the end of the month, the captain's house was properly turned out, and they set to reorganizing. "We need to make this place our very own," she explained. The house was so big that they could make a room for everything. They had a tantrum room filled with cushions and pillows, a dress-up room full of capes, hats, and regalia, a banging pots and pans room, self-explanatory, an inventing room, a gauntlet, which was where Nan made mazes for Charlie to roll through, and a rubbish room, which they had to stop using because the smell of the food scraps became so bad. Nan named all the rooms except for one. Charlie had requested that he do one room all by himself. "Do not peek on it," he said to her. "I want the room to be a surprise." Nan had said he could use the attic, which was enormous and crammed full of unused furniture that she was too lazy to sort. Charlie spent several days working on his room. Nan would hear occasional crashing sounds as pieces of furniture tumbled down the staircase. She had no idea how a creature without arms and legs could move furniture. Perhaps Charlie was stronger than she realized. At last, he came to her with an announcement. "I have finished with my room," he said. Nan followed him up to the attic. The climb was difficult on account of the stairway being full of broken furniture. She opened the door and stepped inside and looked around. "What do you think?" Charlie asked. Nan did not know what to say. "It's enormous." "I will call it the nothing room," he said, "because it is full of nothing." This was true. Each piece of furniture and every trunk and every crate and cobweb was gone. All that remained was a grove of chimney stacks stretching from floor to ceiling like brick tree trunks. Nan nodded. "That is a good name." She hesitated. "What is it for?" Charlie took a deep breath. "For being quiet and things like that." Nan sat down next to him. A nothing room is just what this house needed. Charlie got so warm his head smoldered. He was that proud. Nan and Charlie stayed in the room all through the afternoon and into the night, just being quiet and things like that. That's it for tonight. I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening.